Hi everyone, today let's learn about conscious thought and unconscious thought. I'm just going to find the important things here from the textbook. You can perform a task unconsciously if you arrive at the task with a routine that can be guided by strong habits or powerful cues within the situation. That means just if you have performed a task as a routine, you have done it many times, you can do it unconsciously. Unconscious operations are fast and efficient, but also inflexible. They free you to pay attention to higher order aspects of a task, but leave you ignorant about the sources of your ideas, beliefs, and memories. The workspace neurons create a global workspace, and some scholars argue that this is what makes consciousness possible. The operations of this workspace fit well with many things we know to be true about consciousness. The cognitive unconscious is the broad set of mental activities that you are not aware, but you're not aware of, but that make possible your ordinary interactions with the world. The processes that unfold in the cognitive unconscious are sophisticated and powerful. And as we'll see, it's actually quite helpful that a lot of mental work can take place without conscious supervision. Unconscious processes, conscious products. Here it refers to, let's say, your memories of the past seamlessly combine genuine recall with some amount of after-the-fact reconstruction. For example, when you remember your restaurant dinner last month, you're probably weaving together elements that were actually recorded into memory at the time of the dinner, along with other elements that are just inferences or assumptions. This weaving together is a good thing because it enables you to fill in bits that you've forgotten or bits that you didn't notice in the first place. But it can also create a risk of error. If the dinner you're trying to recall was somehow unusual, the assumptions based on the more typical pattern may be misleading. Your recollection of the dinner is a mental product and is surely something you're aware of. You're unaware, though, of the process that brought you this knowledge, so you have no way of telling which bits are supplied by memory retrieval and which bits rest on inference or assumption. That's why memory errors are often undetectable. Since the process that brings you a memory is unconscious, you can't distinguish genuine recall from potentially misguided assumption. Unconscious reasoning. It's thinking of which the participants were entirely unaware, thinking that took place in their cognitive functioning. Why did the feedback elevate confidence? When the person you heard, good, the person you've chosen is our suspect. It's about in the context of witness. It seems that the witnesses must have been thinking something like, the police say I got the right answer, so I guess I can set aside my doubts. Of course, witnesses aren't aware of making this adjustment. And so the thought process here is again unconscious. Once more, these aren't conscious thoughts, and in this case, the witnesses are being misled by some after-the-fact reconstruction. Mistaken introspections. The processes of thought do seem to be conscious, and you feel like you can voice the reasons for your decision or the basis for your conclusion, if anyone asks. After the fact reconstructions, it's about you have done something and then you ask yourself, why did I do it that way? I have no direct information, but maybe I can draw on my broad knowledge about why, in general, people might act in certain ways in this situation. From that base, I can make some plausible inferences about why I acted as I did. For example, I know that in general, passages about babies or passages about squalor can be emotionally moving. I bet that's what moved me in reading this passage. These after-the-fact reconstructions will often be correct because people's beliefs about why they act as they do are generally sensible. In cases such as this, an inference based on generic knowledge is likely to be accurate. But there are also subjective feelings that can be mistaken. Unconscious guides to conscious thinking. There is a role for the cognitive unconscious because even here a support structure is needed, one that exists at what philosophers have called the fringe or the horizon of your conscious thoughts. A set can sometimes be an obstacle to problem solving, and the fact that the set is unconscious makes it all the more difficult to overcome the obstacle. Nonetheless, you'll be influenced by the unnoticed framing of the decision, the way the options are described, and the way the question is posed. In these ways, an unnoticed framework can guide your deliberate, conscious thinking about your problems, decisions, and more. This framework protects you from uncertainty and ambiguity, but it also governs the content and the sequence of your thoughts. Blind sight. Blind sight is sometimes observed in patients who have suffered damage to the visual cortex. These patients are not aware of seeing, but even so can in some ways see. Perhaps that there are several neural pathways carrying information from the eyeballs to the brain. However, information flow is still possible along some of the other pathways, including a pathway through the superior colliculus in the midbrain. And this is what enables these patients to use visual information that they cannot consciously see. Subliminal perception. People actually can perceive and be influenced by visual inputs they didn't consciously perceive. This is called subliminal perception. The key measure of this study was a brainwave called the N400. A large N400 will be observed when participants hear the last word in a sequence like, he drinks his coffee with cream and dog. This is because it doesn't make sense, it sounds weird. These subliminal words were detected and influencing subsequent perception, creating a context that in some conditions made the word war, for example, more surprising, and in other conditions less so. Apparently, subliminal perception can involve more than the reading of single words. People also seem able to integrate subliminal inputs in a linguistically appropriate fashion. Consciousness and executive control. Your unconscious judgments and inferences tend to be fast, efficient, and reasonable. Your unconscious judgments and inferences are well tuned to and guided by cues in the situation. This pattern is obviously a good thing, but because it means that your unconscious processing won't be foolish, but the pattern also provides an important clue about the nature of and possible limitations on unconscious processing. Unconscious processing can be complex and sophisticated, but it's strongly guided either by the situation you're in or by prior habit. Therefore, when you unconsciously draw a conclusion or make a selection, these steps are likely to be the ones favored by familiarity or by the setting itself. Similarly, when you unconsciously make some response, whether it's an overt action like reaching for an object that you cannot consciously see, or a mental response like noting the meaning of a word you didn't consciously perceive, you're likely to make a familiar response, one that's well practiced in that situation. This is evident, for example, in action slips, cases in which you do something different from what you intend. Okay. Routine is forceful, automatic, and uncontrolled. A role for control. Unconscious processes in perception, memory, and reasoning serve as a sophisticated and highly useful set of mental reflexes. They are guided by circumstances and are generally inflexible. In many regards, though, it's helpful not to have control. Since unconscious processes can operate without supervision, you can run many of these processes at the same time, thereby increasing the speed and efficiency of your mental life. When you learn a new task, you need to monitor each step so that you know when it's time to start the next step. Then you need to choose what the next step will be and when you will start that. This combination of monitoring, choosing, and launching does give you close control over how the things proceed, but it does take a lot of energy. It makes performance demanding. After some practice, then things will be different. The steps needed for the task are still there, but you don't have to think about them one by one. Because you have stored in memory a complete routine that specifies what all the steps should be and when you should take those steps. All you need to do is launch the overall routine, and from that point forward, you let the familiar sequence unfold. Therefore, you don't need to monitor everything. No need for monitoring or decisions. You can do the task without paying close attention to it. The prerequisites for control. Unconscious actions go forward without executive control. That means that executive control is not required in the unconscious actions. When you need to direct your own mental processes, though, to rise above habit or to avoid responding to prominent cues in your surrounding, you do need executive control. In order to perform its function, executive control needs, first of all, a means of launching desired actions and overriding unwanted actions. In other words, the executive needs an output side, things it can do, actions it can initiate. Second, the executive needs some way of representing its goals and sub-goals so that they can serve as guides to action. The executive needs some way of representing its plan or agenda. The executive needs to know what's going on in the mind, what bits of information are coming in. Metacognition. Metacognitive skills are skills in monitoring and controlling their own mental processes. Meta-memory, people's knowledge about awareness of and control over their own memory. Meta-memory judgments, forecast for your own learning and assessments of your learning so far. Meta-memory also includes your beliefs about memory. For example, your belief that mnemonics can be helpful or that deep processing is an effective way to memorize. Another aspect of meta-memory is your ability to control your own studying so that you use your beliefs to guide your own behavior. There is a need for self-monitoring, both in metacognition and executive control. There is a need for self-control and self-direction. In both cases, in metacognition and executive control, you're guided by a sense of goals, whether those goals are generated on the spot or derived from your long-standing beliefs about how your own memory functions. The notion of metacognition and metamemory in particular provides further illustration of the ways in which executive control matters for you and how important it is. The cognitive neuroscience of consciousness. Neural correlates of consciousness. Some brain sites are crucial for your level of alertness or sensitivity, independent of what you're currently sensitive to. The thalamus or reticular activating system in the brain stem, a system that controls the overall arousal level of the forebrain and also helps control the cycling between sleep and wakefulness. Second, a different and broader set of brain sites matters for the content of consciousness. This content can vary widely. Cortical structures in the forebrain are essential when you are thinking about a stimulus that's no longer present in your environment and so on. The broad distinction between the degree of awareness and the content of consciousness is helpful. The neuronal workspace. Let's see the neuronal workspace here. When neurons fire in this coordinated way, the brain seems to register the activity as a linkage among the different processing areas. As a result, these attributes are bound together so that you end up correctly perceiving the stimulus as a unified whole. This synchronization requires communication so that neurons in one brain area can influence and be influenced by neurons in other, perhaps distant brain areas. This communication is made possible by workspace neurons that literally connect one area of the brain to another. Workspace neurons connect one area of the brain to another. The process of carrying information back and forth via the workspace neurons is selective, so that not every bit of neural activity gets linked to every other bit. Instead, various mechanisms create a competition among different brain processes, and the winner, typically the most active process, is communicated to other brain areas, while other information is not. Which elements will win in this competition? Again, attention is crucial. When you pay attention to a stimulus, this involves activity in the prefrontal cortex that can sustain and amplify the activity in other neural systems. The information flow from each brain area to all the others is limited. This point is guaranteed by the competition. At the same time, the information flow is controllable by virtue of what you choose to pay attention to. The integrated activity made possible by the workspace neurons provides the biological basis for consciousness. But what the workspace neurons do is glue these bits together, creating a unified experience and promoting the exchange of information from one module to the next. The function of the neuronal workspace. Okay, you can choose what you're going to focus on. These observations are easily accommodated by the workspace model. The information is carried by the workspace neuron is governed by a competition, and so is limited and also shaped by how you focus attention. In this way, the properties of the workspace readily map onto the properties of your experience. Attention both amplifies and sustains neural activity. As a result, the workspace supported by attention enables you to maintain mental representations in an active state for an extended period. In other words, the workspace makes it possible for you to continue thinking about a stimulus or an idea even after the trigger for that idea has been removed. The point enables us to link the workspace proposal to claims about working memory. Since working memory, the connection seems appropriate, since working memory is the memory that holds materials you're currently working on, which presumably means materials currently within your conscious awareness. The neuronal workspace and executive control. The neural mechanisms underlying consciousness are just the right sort to help you produce novel thoughts in which you can rise above habit or routine. In this way, the workspace provides a plausible neural basis for executive functioning, and with this enables you to escape the limits that seem to characterize unconscious processing. The workspace also provides another function. As we've noted, unconscious processes are generally inflexible. In contrast, conscious thought is guided by a sense of your goals, and it can launch exactly the behavior that will lead to those goals. One area that is crucial for this conflict detection is the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC, a structure linked to and slightly behind the frontal cortex, and also connected to structures, including the amygdala, nucleus accumbens, and the hypothalamus, that play pivotal roles in emotion, motivation, and feelings of reward. The neuronal workspace idea also helps us with another puzzle, a shift in consciousness that every one of us experiences every day. The difference between being awake and being asleep. The role of phenomenal experience. The workspace needs, we can link the workspace to the needs of executive control. The workspace allows comparisons among the various processing streams, and these comparisons enable the executive to monitor mental processes, to ensure that there are no conflicts, and to choose processes that will move you toward your goals. Let me repeat this. Okay, so there's a connection between workspace and executive control. Workspace needs executive control. The workspace allows comparisons among the various processing streams. These comparisons enable the executive to monitor mental processes, to ensure that there are no conflicts, and to those processes that will move you toward your goals. The workspace also supports the sustained neural activity that enables the executive to keep its goals and plans in view as you work on some endeavor. The mechanisms involved in the workspace can also amplify certain types of activity, and this allows the executive to take control of mental events, ramping up desired activities, and allowing distractions to languish. Okay, so there is a connection between the workspace and the executive control. It's like they need each other. The workspace needs executive control, and seems like vice versa. Qualia. My understanding is that qualia is like your own experience. You really experience the thing that you mentioned. For example, here, someone hasn't even tasted chocolate, then you tell that person how the chocolate looks like, how it tastes like. You give the person a lot of information, but not the quale of the chocolate taste. That means that person hasn't really tasted the chocolate physically. Processing fluency. Mental processing is sometimes more fluent and sometimes less so. And people seem sensitive to this degree of fluency. They know when their steps have gone easily and when not. Fluency leads to subjective sense of familiarity. Fluency effects can be demonstrated in many areas. For example, confidence in a particular memory is influenced by the fluency of retrieval, apparently based on reasoning along the lines of that memory came to mind easily. I guess it must be a strong memory and therefore an accurate one, so I can be confident that the memory is right. Availability heuristic. The strategy of judging how frequent something is in the world by relying on how easily you can think of relevant examples. Availability heuristic is about finding an available example in your memory or your mind. How frequent something is in the world by relying on how easily you can think of relevant examples, because these examples are available in your mind. That's why it's called the availability heuristic.